Count us down.
Hold on, come watch.
3, 2, 1, blast off! It's it!
I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, is what Robert Oppenheimer quoted when he was talking about the first time he saw the first nuclear test. In 1946, a new group known as the Strategic Air Command was tasked with the mission of delivering nuclear bombs. The Strategic Air Command would become our deterrent force, or they would become our deliverers of Armageddon. The end of World War II marked the beginning of the next major war. This war was fought between two different ideas: democracy and communism. And it's called the Cold War. It's called the Cold War because the superpowers of the world never openly faced off against one another. That's not to say, though, that there was not confrontation and very near misses into World War III. But we had an advantage against the communists in the beginning parts of this new Cold War, and those were nuclear bombs. President Truman used the threat of nuclear bombs several times against the Soviet Union. Thankfully, we never used them, but it brought about a new question. Is a nuclear bomb just another bomb for the military to use, or is the nuclear bomb something completely different and should be looked at something different? The United States military was torn on the idea. On one side, you had them talking about if the Soviets got it and used it first, no amount of retaliation would ever be enough. So, branches like the Air Force with the Strategic Air Command came up with plans that on the onset of war, targeting cities in the Soviet Union for mass nuclear bombings. Now, other branches of the military were against the idea. They felt that targeting cities would be against the United States' morals and ethics, and that we shouldn't target cities, but we should focus on conventional warfare. In 1949, everything changes. The United States lost their advantage when the Soviet Union successfully tested their own atom bomb. And President Truman and the United States government had a new dilemma: to push forward with a new super weapon, or to just make more of the ones that we have. Now, the physicists who were working on the projects all pleaded against the idea of making a new super weapon. But to keep our advantage, we began to push forward. And with that, the Strategic Air Command was tasked with the job of finding new delivery systems. And at the end of the war, World War II, the United States got their hands on a few Nazi scientists, some rocket scientists, those that were creators of the V-2 rockets. And the Strategic Air Command is going to utilize these scientists and this technology and begin to produce missiles, ballistic missiles, and eventually intercontinental ballistic missiles. They're going to start with things called like the Snark and eventually get to the rockets known as the Atlas rockets. Rockets that could be launched from the middle of the United States and reach targets in the Soviet Union in 30 minutes or less. So just the other day, my family and I broke the stay-at-home protocol and traveled to Lawn, Texas to go visit and tour the Lawn Atlas missile base, a Cold War era missile silo just outside of Abilene, Texas. Now, as we drove up to the complex, we recognized there's nothing there. And that's because the entire thing's underground. All that was there was a giant concrete pad. And on that concrete pad was where the bay doors would open for the missile. We then walked over to a stairwell and began to proceed into the earth. The first level was the common area that housed their bunks and kitchen and those things for the crew that was in there. We then traveled down another level into what was the command center with the guidance systems and computers and things that would have been in there. And an interesting thing is the whole living complex is encased in 9 feet of steel rebar enforced concrete. And not just any kind of rebar, but 3-inch rebar. And the entire structure was suspended with chains. So in the case of a nuclear explosion, the whole thing just would kind of bounce inside the ground. Also, the command center was a Faraday box. Could withstand the EMP pulses and things and not knock out its communications. Well, from there, we traveled another tunnel, through a blast door and through a tunnel, into the actual silo. And today, most of the silo is filled with groundwater as it's seeping up from the bottom. But just the part that you could see, this massive, huge hole that when you find out is nearly 18 stories deep, is pretty incredible. And to think that at one point in time, that silo held a rocket and a missile with the capabilities of wiping out entire cities, and to think that the 5 soldiers inside that base had that kind of power at their fingertips is quite remarkable. And then you think that that was only one of 12 around Abilene and only one of 72 in the United States for the Atlas missile project. Now the Atlas rocket and missile has been decommissioned back in the 60s. And that was just one of the multitude of different weapon systems created during the Cold War. Currently, the United States has over 400 Minuteman III ICBMs, all equipped with thermonuclear weapons. But the rocket program in the Cold War wasn't all bad. As we'll talk about next week, the same rocket technology is going to do something else for mankind, something good for mankind. And that's going to be putting us into space. Look some of this stuff up, watch some shows, read some stuff. That's a quick rundown on the beginning of the Cold War and the Strategic Air Command. We'll see you later.